Welcome to Kids Continued. It's great to have you here. Now, if you watched last week's lesson, you now know that we are in a new book of the Bible. We're on the book of Exodus. That is the second book in the Bible, and we are actually looking at chapters 5 to 14 this week. Now, that's a big chunk, so go and read this section, but we are continuing in our story with Moses. So we met Moses last week, and he went through a lot of stuff, ended up in the desert, but God called him back to Egypt to go and save God's people. Moses was a little unsure about this and I'm not the right guy for this, but God was going to equip Moses to help him to speak to Pharaoh and to get God's people out of Egypt and out of captivity. God sent Moses with his brother Aaron, and they were going to go to Pharaoh and had to tell him that Yahweh, the Lord, has said to let my people go. And Pharaoh was like, who is this Yahweh, this Lord you speak of? It's no one that I know. Why should I listen? God is going to send plagues, going to send punishment over Egypt and over the Egyptians if Pharaoh doesn't listen and doesn't obey God and let his people go. And Pharaoh was stubborn. He said, no, I will not let you go. So God sent plagues. He sent 10 plagues, and some of them were slightly annoying, like things that were just an irritation, but then they got more serious and really, really bad. And Pharaoh, throughout this whole thing, just didn't care, or he cared, but then would go back on his word and wouldn't let God's people go. Let's have a look at these plagues. The first plague, God turned the water in the river Nile into blood. Now that's got to be quite something. I don't know if you know this, but the Nile is one of the longest rivers in the world. Second, God sent frogs into Egypt. Now, I don't mind frogs. They're not that bad. But this amount of frogs, probably like hundreds, maybe a couple more, but frogs into Egypt. They would have been in everything around, in the streets, in your house, in there, everywhere, okay? So you see what I mean by some of these plagues were annoying? So having like blood in the river instead of water, that could cause a bit of a problem, and the frogs were kind of annoying. Now the third plague, God sent gnats. Now gnats, which is spelled gnats, okay, are actually flying insects. They're kind of like flies, but a little bit more annoying, and they bite. So they would bite people and bite the livestock and the animals and things. Next, so number 4, are you keeping up? God sent flies into Egypt. Now I don't know about you, but flies are super annoying. You have to swat them out the way all the time. They're like in your house, they're outside, they hang around your face while you're trying to eat. They're everywhere. So there were thousands, okay? Thousands of flies that were really annoying. And Pharaoh would say, yeah, sure, you can go, and then would change his mind and say, no, your people can't go, you can't leave. Now the 5th plague, God kind of steps up his game. Like I said, they were kind of annoying, but there were some plagues that were really serious, and some serious and if not scary things were going to happen, because God was showing Pharaoh who he was showing him how powerful he was. But Pharaoh just wouldn't change his mind and would not let the people go. So the 5th plague, God caused the livestock to die. Now, livestock was your livelihood. It would be kind of your job. You would be looking after the livestock, but it would also be food for your family. Okay, so God caused the livestock to die. Next, so number 6, God sent boils. Now, boils are like painful sores that would come up on your body. Okay, so the Egyptians were covered in boils. And it was, like I said, it was painful, it was probably itchy, and it really didn't look great. And Pharaoh still did not let God's people go. Number 7, God sent a terrible hailstorm into Egypt. Now, I'm pretty sure you guys have maybe seen pictures, or maybe you've been around when there's a hailstorm. It is super loud. Now, some of the hail balls are like kind of small, but then you get some that are like golf balls or even bigger. So God sent a terrible hailstorm into Egypt. Now, this would have caused a lot of damage. It would have given damage to your crops, to your houses. It would have hurt people if they were outside. Then Pharaoh said, "Fine, go." And God stopped the hail, and then Pharaoh changed his mind again. He said, "Nope, you are not leaving." Number 8. God sent locusts into Egypt. Swarms and swarms of locusts. Do you guys know what a locust is? Do you know what they do? So locusts like to eat food. And their food is crops. So plants and like the crops and things that they were growing that weren't damaged from the hail were now being eaten by locusts. And these things will eat everything. They'll probably eat it right down to the soil, okay? So then the Egyptians wouldn't have food. So they've lost their livestock. They've now lost their food. They've got boils on them. They were sore and itchy. They've been pummeled with hail. The water in the river has turned to blood. There have been flies. There have been gnats. There have been frogs. All sorts of things that have gone on. And Pharaoh has still said, "Nope, you will not go." Number 9, God sent a darkness over the land, okay? So there was no light. You'd have to use a torch, which for us would just be a click of a button. But for them, they had to make a fire to have a torch, okay? To have any light. There was darkness over Egypt for 3 days. And still, Pharaoh said, can you guess? He said, "Nope, I will not let your people go." God told Moses he would bring one more plague. So this would be number 10. And after that, Pharaoh will let your people go. Now, this plague was really harsh. I'm going to use the word harsh, but it was a really bad punishment, okay? So God told Moses to tell the Israelite people to slaughter a lamb, a spotless lamb, okay, one that was like perfect, had no imperfections or deformities, and to use the blood and sprinkle the blood over the doorframe of their house. Because then God would know that these people are my people, that they are Israelites, and God would pass by and nothing would happen. Now, because the Egyptians weren't part of the Israelites, because they weren't listening to God, weren't listening to Moses, what was going to happen is that the firstborn in every household was going to die. So children were going to die. Now this sounds terrible, but this was the punishment that was due to the Egyptians for not following God and not listening to him and not letting his people go. Now this event is called Passover. I'm sure you've heard this term before because we celebrate Passover at Easter. And they link together, but I'll chat about that in a minute. So at midnight, God came, and if he got to a door of a household where there was blood on the door, he would pass by. But if there wasn't, he would then go in and the firstborn of the family would die. In the morning, every Egyptian household had someone in their household who had died. Even the Pharaoh, who had a son, his son had died. After that, just as God had said, Pharaoh let the people go. They were allowed to leave, and the people traveled on their way to the promised land where God had promised them they would be able to live. But Pharaoh then changed his mind, and he started following or chasing after this nation, after the Israelites. But they got to the sea, and I don't know about you, if you're sitting in front of the ocean and you don't have a boat and there's this huge army coming behind you, I'd be a little worried. But God had a plan, and he used Moses again, and he parted the sea, the parting of the Red Sea, so that the Israelites could walk through and get through safely to the other side. Now, once they were safely there, and obviously Pharaoh was chasing behind them, God closed the sea, so the Israelites were safe on the other side, but Pharaoh's army was washed away, and none of them survived. Now, this was a really intense and almost crazy time, all these things that were happening. But God was showing the Egyptians and showing Pharaoh who he was and how powerful he was. Now, remember how I said Passover is something that we celebrate now? It looks very different to how it was here with the Egyptians and the Israelites. But the same thing applies, that the Israelites had to sacrifice a perfect, spotless lamb in order to be saved from God and his punishment. And we have that today. And our perfect, spotless lamb is Jesus. Jesus came, he lived a life that had no sin in it. He was righteous and holy, but he died on the cross to save all of us from sin. So Jesus was our sacrificial lamb, just as the Israelites sacrificed a lamb to save them. So if we believe in Jesus, believe that he died on the cross to save us from our sin, and trust in him, we are accepted into his family. If we turn away from a life of sin and follow him, follow the example that he has led for us to live, we will become a member of God's family. So through all of this, God had a plan to rescue his people from captivity. And he also had a plan to rescue us from sin. He sent Jesus. Just like he sent Moses to save the Israelites, Jesus came to save each and every one of us. So have a look this week, reading in Exodus 5 to 14, and see what else you can find in the scripture. Remember to read the Bible passage, even though you're watching this video. Read the Bible passage, see what else is in there, and maybe you have some more questions and things that we can go through, or things you can ask your parents or other people in your life who can give you some insights into what's going on. I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next time.